So as we start the actual purity culture series, I shared a little bit about it last week, but this week we're starting with our guests. We have the next 7 weeks. We're going to have guests talk about what's happening in the purity culture, what happened, and how it affects our lives. So today we have Ashley Hudson, who has a doctorate in sexology, focusing on the purity culture. So I couldn't think of a better way to start things off. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to focus on sexology, postpartum health, and the purity culture?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started originally as a therapist focusing in the perinatal mental health world, worked a lot in different faith spaces, and just noticed a lot of struggles that the individual and couple clients I had were experiencing related to sex and intimacy. And as I leaned in a little bit more, I began seeing some trends that ultimately I recognized as part of the purity culture situation. And I was also getting asked to talk about sex in different settings that ultimately just drove me to a place of wanting to learn more and have more training and background so that I could speak with more authority and just understanding in these ways. And so I pursued a PhD in clinical sexology, and my dissertation focused on the impact of purity culture on postpartum women, noting that intersection really is a vulnerable one. We're seeing a lot of vulnerability that comes with the purity culture movement and the impact of that movement, as you know, and as you will find out even more about. And then also with the postpartum folks, there's incredible vulnerability among those individuals, noting that a lot of them do struggle for various reasons in the postpartum period. So when you look at the intersection there of purity culture and postpartum, we're seeing a ton of vulnerability that intersect, and I really wanted to be able to address that. So that's what got me into it.
Yeah, that's not something that I really had ever thought about, is that postpartum piece and how that plays in. That's so incredibly fascinating. So, from a
Mhm.
clinical perspective, what are the most common patterns that you see in women who are raised in purity culture?
I see a lot of shame, hypervigilance, difficulty identifying desire, trouble expressing boundaries, difficulty feeling present in their bodies. So, limited body literacy, pleasure literacy is really a deficit for many of them. For a lot of, especially for women, sex feels like something they need to manage and perform rather than something they can really experience and receive through.
Yep.
So those are some of the general trends that I see.
Yeah. So I read one study that a woman had interviewed 20,000 women or surveyed 20,000 women. And out of that 20,000, 35% of the women said they had no idea that an orgasm was possible for a woman. That really my job as a woman is to be the gatekeeper of the man's sexual health and to make sure that he's taken care of, and it didn't
Mhm.
occur to them that they actually could be taken care of as well.
Absolutely. Yes. And I mean, I have right now, I've built programs and it's about to launch, but so much material around that addresses some of these, what I call scripts that were given to us through purity culture and how those show up long term in marriages, even in good marriages, how
Yeah.
these scripts don't just disappear when you get married. They actually live in your body and live in your cortex. And it's not something that you can just erase with a wedding vow or, even just a couple sessions of couples therapy. It requires a lot of dynamic work. And so you're absolutely right. It's incredibly sad that many women were never told that sex could be for them too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's a really valid point. Is you think that beforehand, okay, I'm going to get married and then it's all going to be great because now we have permission to have sex. We can have sex, right? And the reality of so many women that I'm talking to and so many women that I work with is there's so much pressure and there's so much anxiety and there's so much shame and so much guilt because they have been told sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. If you have sex, then you are like that chewed up piece of gum or that used tissue, and you're no longer. And so it's so hard to reverse that line of thinking just because you walk down the aisle. Now all of a sudden, oh, sex is good, right? Is that some of the things that you're seeing in your practice as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I talk a lot about in the therapy community, we say what fires together, wires together. It's kind of like the psychology of association. If you constantly experience one thing with another, then those two neural systems fire together constantly. And so,
Yep.
if sex is, if anything related to arousal or sexuality fires at the same time as shame or fear or anxiety, then those things get closely wired together cognitively. And to unwire those doesn't just happen when you walk down the aisle. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of work. And ultimately, gosh, our goal for a lot of the people I interviewed in my own research for my own dissertation said, I think with the exception of maybe one mom, said, I want to teach my kids something different because this just doesn't work, And so I think
Yeah.
we're all kind of wanting to teach our kids something different, so that those two things aren't firing together constantly, and there's less hurdles when you do get married. But absolutely, I see that all of the time. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So what messages do purity culture send to women about their bodies sexually and their identity? So let's play that out a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, for women specifically, the body kind of gets labeled as something that could be dangerous, that could cause harm, that needs to be managed, that her value and worth is somehow tied to how she shows up, whether it be through modesty or how she displays herself in appeasing and comforting and getting the approval of others, and walking in compliance with others. And so I think that the purity culture messages, it's hard to name. And for many people, I think that's the reason it's taken a long time to name and talk about, is because it's really difficult to assign language to some of these experiences, because no one stood up and said you are bad if this happens. Maybe that did happen for some, but usually the messaging was a little bit more subtle and occurred through things like object lessons, like you described, the tissues and the chewed gum and the duct tape and the rose petals. Those were the lessons. And so I think the internalization of that, women usually in my practice and in my research walked away feeling like, okay, I need to manage my body. I need to monitor my body. I need to constantly be scanning the environment and ensuring that the way I'm managing my body is in compliance with what's expected and what's needed by others, which is another reason that postpartum offers such a vulnerability, is because her body is needed in a new way by a baby. And when you layer that on top of a partner, especially in the context of having been told you need to perform every 72 hours or this partner is going to leave, that puts her in a really vulnerable position when she's healing from birth. And it kind of feels like she's in a double bind. I have to perform sexually to keep someone around, to keep us safe and provide, because I can't, I'm healing. So anyways, yeah, I think that there is a complexity there, but overall that was kind of the message many women received.
Yeah, and I think women are told that, they not only do you have to manage my own body and my own sense, but I have to manage, you as a man. I have to like be the keeper of, be the gatekeeper of you and your sexuality and make sure that you're okay and make sure that, and so then I remember after having my own child that, the last thing that you feel once you have a baby is sexy, right? You just don't. And like all of a sudden I have this body, and even if you're Cindy Crawford, right, you still have parts of
Yeah.
your body that you don't love, right? And so, to now I have to like have that added pressure. I can only imagine.
Yeah, so sad and so hard. A lot of the women, that was kind of their breaking point, was postpartum, for this very reason of like, I physically can't show up in the ways I'm being asked. And so, yeah, so sad, so hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it also plays into that mentality that we have as even from the time we're little girls, we play with our babies, right? Like our job, and not that being a mom is not incredibly fulfilling, it is amazing fulfilling, and I love being a mom, but that, like this is my role. Like I am this baby making machine. I am to take care of my husband. I am to make sure the kids are happy, my husband is happy, and and if somehow there's some energy left over for me, then it's okay for me too, right?
Yeah, you can take a shower. Yeah. I mean, I think that for women socialized in the purity culture movement or evangelical church in general, we were taught that you have to give up self and disconnect from your body in an effort first to keep everyone safe,
Yeah.
um, and then to care and give to everyone around you, and that was your calling. And when you place such a word as calling on the existence of a body, the existence of a role, you're placing a value statement and a ton of energy and identity within a performance, what we call gender performance in the research.
Yep.
And that doesn't tend to lend itself toward fulfillment of life, or nor do I believe it's what God ultimately has for us, right? And so it's really unfortunate that you're absolutely right. So many girls and women have been socialized to give up self and to exist for the sake of others, and to disconnect from their bodies in order to do so because it's necessary. And then you end up thrown into a marriage and you're a few years in and you're like, wait, now we have all of this, we're all talking about it. And I'm hearing all these girls say, wait, you can have fun too. Well, no one ever told me that. And also, I don't know how to connect with my body. I feel completely numb. I'm doing the grocery shopping while we're doing the deed. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
that's what I hear a lot. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not there. I don't know how to be there in my body. I didn't even know that was an option. Um, so, yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So that kind of is a great segue into let's talk about the orgasm gap
Mhm.
and why it's particularly relevant for women who grew up in purity culture.
So the orgasm gap refers to this concept that women, especially in heterosexual relationships, tend to orgasm less frequently and reliably than men. The statistic is somewhere around between 90 to 95% of men orgasm almost all of the time, and about 62 to 65% of women do. And so they are starting to talk more about this gap. And I would venture to say that this gap is even wider within the evangelical, um, population, especially those who experience purity culture. And a huge reason for that is because of this disconnect from bodies that we were just talking about. It's hard to experience an orgasm in a body that you don't live in, that you're not
Yeah.
physically landing in. Um, Additionally, it's hard to, the very definition when we're working with things like anorgasmia is, which is the inability to experience an orgasm, is kind of orgasm requires a release and a surrender. And when women are taught to monitor and manage their bodies, and sex is fused together with a sense of anxiety, it's the antithesis of surrender. It's the antithesis of rest, which therefore is the antithesis of what we would describe an orgasm as. So it makes it really hard for women in a lot of ways because of that messaging and the internalization of that. But and then other ways is just lack of body literacy. It's hard for a lot of women. They were never taught about the clitoris. Which the majority of women orgasm from clitoral stimulation, not from penetration. And so when you add all of those things up, it makes a lot of sense that there would be an orgasm gap among this
Yeah.
population.
Yeah. So, so many thoughts because so we are taught that we have to be in control all the time, right? And
Mhm.
so you're right, it's hard to and it's hard to express any kind of sexual desire or any kind of sexual exploration when you're focused on being disengaged, A, and B, making sure that your husband is taken care of, right? Like, I have so many thoughts going through my head when that's happening that, like, how can I totally, where orgasm requires you to completely relax and, be in the moment. So I think you're so right. So why do you think so many women struggle to experience pleasure in marriage, even in healthy relationships?
Well, I think if you've ever heard of the book Body Keeps the Score or read any on how psychosomatic um, just theories are out there that talk about the ways our body holds on to psychological scripts and experiences, such as purity culture. There's new literature that's framing up purity culture as a sexual trauma. When you look at pelvic floors of women who have gone through purity culture movement teachings and you compare them to the pelvic floors of individuals who have been through SA, you see a lot of similarities. In fact, some research, some reports from pelvic floor physical therapists say it's hard to tell the difference. The body is actually holding on to this information in a very similar way. And of course it is. If every time you have arousal and sexuality firing alongside, you're dangerous or you are in danger, you need to fight or flee, um, of course you're going to shut down. Your body is going to shut down with or without your brain's consent, because your body's job is to keep you safe. And your brain's job is to do whatever it takes to keep you safe. And so your body's behaving brilliantly. And I think it takes a lot of reps, it takes a lot of work to disembody, kind of disentangle all of these messages and relearn a new framework, rescript this whole sexual expression and experience. Because a partner does not automatically undo unhealthy sexual formation. That takes a lot of work and a lot of intentionality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what happens when a woman who has been conditioned to prioritize her partner's needs over her own sexual experiences?
It really teaches a woman to stay externally focused, and instead of asking and getting curious about her own experiences and her body, so instead of asking like, "What am I feeling?" you're constantly scanning and learn and considering, how do I prevent temptation? How do I reduce conflict? How do I meet everyone's expectations and take care of everyone and to keep someone else regulated? That tends to be kind of the assignment, of women, as we said, who socialized in this setting, is to take care of everyone else and keep the peace, keep everyone else happy. And in order to do that, again, it requires disconnection from your body to a certain extent, to ignore your own cues. And so I think that when you ask how this impacts their experience of intimacy, it's really hard to experience sexual intimacy when you're constantly looking externally focused and you're unable to land in your own body and look inside and get curious about what feels good to you, and allow, in my research I described it as a splintering. For a lot of those who were socialized in the purity culture movement, they didn't learn how to integrate physical expression of intimacy and emotional expression of intimacy, because as they developed their relationship, there was limited capacity for physical expression and a huge, almost like there's no ceiling on emotional expression. And there was very little understanding in their bodies and brains on how to integrate what it looks like to feel emotionally connected to someone with physical expression, because those two things occurred differently at different paces. They didn't really occur together and develop together in a natural cadence.
Yeah.
So I think that the belief that women are responsible for managing men's sexual desires makes it really hard for them to get curious about their own interests and own desires, because they're
Yeah.
constantly caring for others.
Yeah. And I think, like in the day to day, we spend so much time, we are driving kids to soccer practice. We're working, we're doing whatever we're doing all day for other people to make sure, whether it's our boss, whether it's our kids, whether it's we're making dinner, we're doing laundry, all the things. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so then to turn that off and to go, okay, now we're going to spend some time and it's just going to be all about me and my partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is so hard to do on a regular basis, but then when you bring all the guilt and shame and different things of purity culture, it just adds so much to that.
It adds a tremendous amount of complexity. It's already hard. It's already hard when you have children and you're in the trenches. It's hard for different reasons and different stages to cultivate meaningful intimacy. But in this stage in particular, you're right. It's just already so hard. And when there's obligation sex and pressure messaging that goes along with that, which is kind of the fruit of purity culture, obligation and duty sex register in the nervous system as a threat. And so when you are feeling threat, your body is not built to have sex. You're not supposed to make love when you're feeling threat in your nervous system. And learning or being required to override that again and again requires you to engage numbness and dissociation. And that's not what God designed. That's unhealthy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Which is so hard in our brains to overcome, right? You're right. Like it's hard to be in joy in the moment when you're in fight or flight.
Yeah, absolutely. I work a lot with moms on well, couples in general, on building in transition periods because it is really hard. This is what I like to say. Like, it's really hard to go from being a walking napkin or milk machine to being a sexual woman who feels erotic. That's a transition that requires gentleness and space and practice. And so I think that a lot of women give themselves a hard time for not being able to shift from one role to another. And the reality of it is that your brain just requires time to reset the nervous system and to ease into becoming, or to being an individual woman with autonomy and choice and a sense of eroticism and not just mommy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So we've seen research suggesting that higher rates of painful sex among women who internalize the purity culture messaging. What is happening physically and emotionally to cause that?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think I have shared when the nervous system is constantly operating in fight or flight, you're going to wire together sex with a sense of need to protect oneself. And one of the first responses in the nervous system is to shut down the pelvic floor for good reason, right? Our pelvic floor is so closely wired together with our fight or flight system. And that makes a lot of sense. It's not time to use the bathroom or have sex when you need to run from a tiger, or fight for your life. That's not a great time to do those things. And so these regions of our body shut down on purpose. Um, the statistics are really sad. We've known since Masters and Johnson's research in the 70s that conservative women do experience a high degree or much more likely to experience vaginismus. And that research was recently repeated by Swatsky and her team, and they found that women coming from Christian environments report twice as much vaginismus. And another study that I reported in my dissertation said women coming from Catholic and Protestant backgrounds were 3 times as likely to experience pain during sexual encounters. And again, I think when your nervous system is wired together, danger, threat with sex, you're going to have a pelvic floor that is very tense, very sensitive. And it does a lot of women. Thank God now pelvic floor PT is becoming more standard and is being talked about. That's kind of new within the last several years, actually. And it is a necessary tool for many women in navigating sexual pain.
I'm so glad that we are we're getting better,
Absolutely.
right? Like we're having a lot more conversations about it, which I think
Yes.
is so amazing.
The needle is moving, and I'm so grateful. It's so important.
Yeah,
hmm
yeah. So what happens when a woman feels um, overwhelmed but still believes she's obligated to meet her partner's needs?
I mean, it's really hard. I think that revisiting the scriptures, revisiting kind of the belief system and the meaning of sex is really critical because as long as she believes that she is required and the only solution to managing her husband's body, she is required to override her internal cues again and again and again. And
Yep.
the by doing so, you are requiring yourself to numb. And in that, you grow aversion, you grow resent, You grow in your skill to dissociate, which is your body's skill. I mean, that's brilliant. It's brilliant for your body to do. It's just not God's best. And so I think reconsidering the meaning of sex, the roles of partner, there's so much great work out. I mean, the Gregories are hitting it so hard. They're doing a great job out there in Canada. Like, we have great sex rescue, we have She Deserves Better, we have all of these resources at our fingertips to help us unlearn these scripts and relearn what is so. And even if you are nervous to, or Julie Slattery has some great stuff out. I don't see eye to eye with her on everything, but we're beginning to change the conversation around sex and around what it means to be a husband and what it means to be a wife in these intimate spaces. And so in my research specifically, it really did require both partners to revisit gender roles and what it means to be a man in the bedroom, what it means to be a woman in the bedroom. And once the couple, each individual, was willing to revisit those with a degree of cognitive and theological flexibility, their sexual satisfaction enhanced remarkably. It went up a great deal, according to the tool I used. So I think it's important to reconsider the meaning of sex. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that, I don't think you can say enough times it is not God's plan for you not to be able to enjoy sex. It's not, right? Like, he created pieces of your body so that you could also have pleasure versus, just because if he didn't want you to experience pleasure, he would not have those, right? If you were just supposed to have children without enjoying yourself, or enjoying that intimate time, because there's not any other act, or there's not any other thing that you do that it allows you to be so incredibly vulnerable with another person. And that is really what God intended our marriages to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's to be seen in vulnerability. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is so key and so important. And I tell people that, like, the clitoris wasn't given to urinate or to procreate. There's only one role it plays in your body, and that is pleasure. And if God didn't have pleasure for women in sex, then I don't know that the clitoris would have much point to it. So I think you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how does the messaging of purity culture and the messaging of a lot of churches, how does that influence consent and communication within a marriage?
Well, I mean, it overrides consent completely if the automatic assumption is that you're going to say yes constantly, and that not only you're going to, but you have to. I like to say whenever you can't say no, you can't honestly and truly say yes. And intimacy is cultivated in spaces where there is agency and choice. And without agency and choice, that's that's not true intimacy. That's not being chosen. That's like a contract agreement. And I can't help but believe God has a lot more for us in a marriage than just transaction. A lot of times people feel like that's safer just to have a transaction, but ultimately it leads to more pain and hardship for individuals and couples. And so I think healthy intimacy has to incorporate mutuality and discernment and embodiment and choice. And when there is that, and when we're grounding ourselves in a value system and a love for one another and curiosity rather than judgment of one another, then we are centering ourselves in something that will lead to more intimacy.
Yeah. I know primarily you work with women, but what can you say to the men that are out there that are kind of that same belief of, no, if she wants to be a good wife and she wants to be submissive to God, then she should make herself available to me whenever I need to.
Yeah, that one's tricky. I think that it's tricky because there's a lack of understanding of the way the nervous system and sexuality operates together.
Yep.
Um, I think there's an oversimplification of what marriage means. I think that when you begin viewing marriage that way, in a tit for tat, like you do this, I do that, um, it lends itself to sexual entitlement. It lends itself to expectations that might not be realistic. And ultimately, it creates a pressure cooker in which most marriages crash and
Yeah.
burn, because I'm part of that often, getting to see
Yeah.
how that plays
Yeah.
out.
And I think that, as a man, you benefit from coming alongside and learning, the nervous system and how that works, learning about your wife and how, what she works and what she desires. Like that only serves to enrich every area of your life, including your sexuality.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know if you've talked to Angela. She's great, Angela Griffith over at the Christian Sexpert. But I love what she says in that sex is supposed to be an expression of intimacy that's already been established. It's the most vulnerable space to demonstrate sexual or intimate connection, is sexuality. And I think both partners could benefit. I don't want to just say men, but I think both partners could benefit from a posture of curiosity over judgment, asking more questions about what each other needs, how you can set up one another for a regulated nervous system without costing a sense of self and asking them to override their nervous system.
Yeah.
I posted on this yesterday on my TikTok, and the amount of men that lost their ever loving minds because I said that, their wife wasn't just something for them to ejaculate in was very disturbing. I think the way scripture has been weaponized is a huge reason a lot of people are leaving the church and turning away from Jesus altogether. And that's devastating to me because when you read the scriptures and actually look at all the different interpretations and you read, theologians who have done a lot of work to make sense of this, in context, you realize that we have really gotten things wrong in America, or in the Western part of the church. And it breaks my heart, along with, I believe, along with Jesus's heart, because he wants intimacy to be something that brings us together in mutuality and celebration and not a performance of you do this and I do that. That's consumerism. You can buy sex work. Like that's legal in a lot of places. If that's what you want, then do that. But don't coerce a partner. That's sin.
Yeah. And I love that. It's supposed to be a celebration. So true.
Mm-hmm.
For both. Everybody's celebrating. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can a
Mm-hmm.
woman be a faithful Christian and still have boundaries when it comes to sex?
Of course, yes. Boundaries are not rebellion. They're part of wisdom and honesty and stewardship and self knowledge and self literacy. I even in my rescripting program talk about how anger can be a signal that a boundary is needed. Um, Boundaries aren't bad, they're just a way of honoring how you're wired. And again, if we can view boundaries as bridges and not barricades, as ways of learning how we can connect with one another rather than how we cannot connect with one another, then we're both going to set ourselves up for a really good time. I think consent is really confusing because we've been taught about enthusiastic yeses, but there's also this whole world of enthusiastic maybes. And we have this whole sex is a playground. It's a fun, erotic playground where we get to hang out with our best friend that we've chosen to partner with in life. And that is so fun. And in doing that, we will learn in different seasons that, especially postpartum is a great example. A lot of women are like, hey, my breasts aren't part of playtime right now. They're just not. I'm using them for something else. So what can we do? Like, what else can we do? Having a broader touch menu. And so, yeah, I think it takes a relearning and an undoing of a lot of scripts and formation and a relearning of what sex is for, what bodies are for, and an openness to the fact that boundaries change and evolve in different seasons for different reasons. And that's all great. You just
Yeah.
holding curiosity is important.
And your sex life does not have to look like anybody else's,
Right.
right? Like I know that, sometimes we share maybe more than we should in moms groups and that kind of thing, and we compare. And the reality is, I love that you said you get to play, it's a playground that you get to play with your best friend. That is amazing. But, so nobody else is in that playground, right? Nobody
Yeah.
else is invited to that playground, right? And
Right.
so, just because you like to go on the merry-go-round and your friends and her partner want to be on the swings, right? That is okay. right?
Yeah,
There's no comparison.
absolutely. Absolutely. You're so right. I mean, comparison can be such a trap. And I know couples who, I mean, frequency is a huge thing. Couples come to me with complaints or surrounding frequency. Um, I know couples who are having sex daily and the satisfaction is down here, real low. And then couples who are having sex once a month and they're the happiest, most intimate, connected individuals I've seen. And so it's it's so hard, and you're so right. God has designed us each differently and given us a partner that's different on purpose. We
Yep.
are to sanctify one another, and sanctification is not an invitation to give up self. It's to learn, what it means to be selfless, and selfless and giving up self are two very different things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what does healthy, connected, mutually satisfying intimacy look like in marriage?
It looks like safety, obviously, emotionally and physically, mutuality. And I say mutuality meaning not everyone's orgasming, because for some people, a good time might not end in that, and that's a whole nother conversation in the ways that we've just made orgasm and a finish line. Understanding what feels connected to your partner, honoring consent, being responsive to one another's needs, connecting emotionally, and learning how to connect and bridge that emotional and physical expression that so many of us were taught to silo, is really important. Being honest for both people's needs and wants. If that is space, we honor that. If that is connection, we do our best to honor that without giving up self. Um, and shared capacity and willingness to adapt over time. I talk a lot in my dissertation and work about lifespan sexual awareness and being able to recognize, like, hey, if good sex is hinged on a hard penis and a lubricated vagina, you're putting quite the timeline on your sexual connection. So, being able to broaden that menu and redefine what sexual and intimate connection looks like throughout the lifespan is really important.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So for women who feel numb or even broken sexually, because all of a sudden it's interesting that, if you've had sex or if you have been intimate in a way that, it goes against your family. I know that purity culture ranges from we can only hold hands versus we can't have sex and everything in
Yeah,
between, right?
right.
So
Mhm.
if somehow you've broken that family belief and you come into a marriage, it's interesting that it like those things rise to the top, right?
Yeah.
So, and you begin to feel broken and like you can't, you know, you disconnect yourself. So then how does healing begin from that?
Gently, without pressure. I think a lot of women have a picture of what they want their healing journey to look like and what healthy sexuality looks like for them. And they put a timeline on it and they make themselves feel like, okay, I'm 38. If I don't fix this within the next year, our marriage is doomed, or we're never going to have kids, or whatever the situation is for them. But I mean, also, there's so much freedom in just being able to view your experience, such as numbness or dissociation or pain, and simply say, wow, that actually makes sense. It makes sense that this is my experience sexually,
Yeah.
because that is validating, it's not judgmental, and it provides you a place to say, okay, this makes sense, and we can heal. And so slowly rebuilding safety through awareness and learning language and doing some grief work. And ultimately, a lot of my research supported the need for relational attunement. So, sharing with a partner that's emotionally safe and able to attune. And attunement is different than saying, oh, honey, we're married now, so everything's fine. Why do you feel this way? Attunement is looking at your partner and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe they said that to you when you were 12. That must have been so hard.
Yeah.
How is that showing up for you in the bedroom? Is there anything I can do to help? And the invitation is not to fix, it's to bear witness and to connect emotionally to what your partner's experiencing emotionally. Your partner needs to feel felt. And so to be able to just know, like, okay, my partner understands I'm really doing the work and this is hard is tremendously helpful. And there's a lot of programs out there now, like my own Rescripting Sex and thousands of others that are trying to do similar work, where we are helping to teach people to land back in their bodies. It can be hard to find sex therapists that are Christian, but they do exist. And one of the biggest myths that I bust is that sex therapy is only for couples. I actually work mostly with individuals around things like this. So that's what I would
That
say.
is such a good point, right? Because if I can't get my husband or my partner to come with me, then there's things that I can do myself to help, right? Yeah, yeah. So, what are some gentle, practical first steps a woman can take to reconnect with her body?
I invite folks into non-sexual awareness first. So noticing your five senses, doing breath work, noticing moments of comfort, noticing moments of fatigue. I do a pleasure exercise with folks where I have them just scan their five senses throughout, like at some point each day, set their alarm and scan their five senses and tune into an experience of pleasure, whether it's, a sip of coffee that feels really good, or a soft blanket or sweater, or, a lovely candle they have that they can light, and actually savor that and linger in it for a second and notice what pleasure feels like in your body. Again, this is all non-sexual. It's just very, very basic. Um, Even noticing things like hunger cues. The amount of women I've worked with actually who have disconnected from their bodies so much that they don't know how to feel hunger is really sad. So just noticing when you do feel hungry and thanking your body for giving you that cue. So developing a relationship with your body that feels safe, where you're getting curious about your body and also thanking your body and blessing your body is such a helpful start at embodied awareness, which is a huge protective factor when it comes to sexual satisfaction.
Hey, so I'm working, I'm understanding some of those things that you're talking about. Things are changing. Like what are some things or some ways that I can now talk to my husband about that?
Yeah, I think that gently moving towards your partner. I do a lot of talking with women and individuals, men too, about how to discern if their relationship is able to hold the weight of these conversations, because sometimes there's not the emotional foundation that's needed to
Yeah.
safely hold the weight of this conversation. And there is a difference between secrecy and privacy. And it's okay as you're growing in your sexual journey of healing, as long as you are standing by your vows and being consistent with your value system, to hold things close and sit before the Lord and heal. And you don't have to carry everything to a partner who isn't emotionally ready to hear it. That being said, if you are partnered with someone who is emotionally safe and is able to listen with curiosity and not judgment, moving toward them and saying, "Hey, I'm realizing, or I just listened to this podcast and I'm realizing I think I have some scripts or some messages, some baggage that my body's holding on to without my brain's consent. And I've been told that that's going to take some intentional work to untangle. And I just wanted to let you know I want to do that work, and parts of it might involve you, and would love to talk about that when you feel ready." Something like that
I love
uh,
that. I
could
love
be a
that. And I
powerful
think
start.
that, if you have kids at home, it's okay to go out to dinner and have a discussion like that. Sometimes I think we as women in our head feel like, okay, well, I'm out with my husband. I can't talk about the kids. I can't talk about this. But like, really, these discussions are great over steak and lobster or whatever you just, or Mexican or whatever you guys like to go do, right? It's important to have when you're sitting, you're talking, your defenses are down a little bit and you're able to have some of those open conversations and it's kind of a safe place. Like one of the things that I tell my moms and teenagers is the best time to have conversations is in the car because it's just so unintimidating, right? You can talk and you talk about all different things. I feel like that's the same with couples. If you go out to dinner, there's no interruptions other than the waiter and you can just sit across from one another and just have some of these open honest discussions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And framing it up as like, "Hey, babe, I've really been thinking about this. I love you so much. I want to grow in connection and intimacy over the next few months."
Yeah.
just like a lighthearted opener, the bigger you make it in your head, the harder it is going to be to open your mouth and begin the conversation.
Yeah.
The car rides, I like to say these heavier conversations, if they are going to lend themselves to any kind of intensity, maybe not before bed. Um, but moments where there is low, like you're saying, low emotion, low cognition, we're laid back and having fun is a great time to just, and again, this is God's like erratic, this is just a playground for
Yeah.
us and our partners. Like if we can remember and stay connected with the lighthearted nature of the fact that this is, I mean, of course it's sacred and we're going to give it the due respect. And this is like a really fun playground situation. Like we don't have to make it that big of a deal. We can be lighthearted about it.
Okay, so I take that back. You might want to have grandma watch the kids overnight for the hotel.
Yeah, I mean, that's
You're
a
going to
great,
have those kind of conversations, and maybe in second thought, you better be prepared,
sure. It look different.
which is not a bad thing at all.
Right. Yeah, totally. Uh-huh.
I love that. I love that. It's so true. Okay, so for women who feel guilt or even fear around these conversations, right? Because I think sometimes we are just our worst enemy in our head. Like we create these scenarios and this pressure on ourselves of what it could look like or what's going to happen. And oh my gosh, life, there's so much within this. And like we just put so much pressure on ourselves. So, how can we kind of alleviate some of that and just really, help process through that guilt and fear?
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, we're really hard on ourselves. I think the culture has done a really good job at disrupting our relationship with our bodies. For many, that showed up in disordered eating. For others, it showed up in self harm in other ways, or just complete numbness and compliance with the system and the goody two shoes move. We all did it differently, but we did it. We learned to be hard on ourselves on purpose because it helped us survive and remain safe and connected with our community. It makes sense. And again, starting with the fact of like, hey, the fact that I'm hard on myself makes a lot of sense. Just saying that to yourself, you likely will feel a lift. And then to begin to establish a new relationship with yourself and your body through recognizing your body's not the enemy. And going slow is not failure. This is just process. This is what healing looks like, and your healing's going to look different than mine and then Susie Q's and your other friend at small group. Like we all got a different path, and that's okay. But learning to enjoy this journey, even if it's hard, as a slow revelation of fullness of life and what God has for you. Like you're on a treasure hunt rather than a judgment hunt of
Yeah.
everything that you're doing wrong. There is no timeline on this. You get to heal at your own pace. And it's actually really important that you listen to your body, because the overriding of your body this whole time is what got us here. So I like to really encourage folks to bless their body, listen to their body, and recognize early on that your body is actually not the enemy. The culture is. And if you hear a voice that says you're doing this so slow, this is wrong, where did we hear that? Like get quiet and ask yourself, who's saying that? And see if a picture or a book or a podcast or something comes to mind from when you were younger that told you that this was the expectation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that is so good in that, um, we can't nor will we be able to fix it like today, right? And the lovely thing is you have the rest of your life with this person. So like you have time. And the reality is your body is going to change as a woman, whether, in your 20s is different than your 30s, which is different than your 40s, which is, and on up. And so it's good, a continual learning process about what you like, what you don't. Maybe you start off on the seesaws in the playground, you love that, and then like 10 years from now you are all about the swings, right? Whatever that looks like, it's going to change, and it's that constant communication and talking with your partner to figure that out.
Absolutely. 100%. I love that. Yeah.
So, um what is the one thing, the one big takeaway that you would give women who are listening to this, who have been raised in a purity culture, I kissed dating goodbye, and maybe they didn't, and now, it was in the night, we got married in the 90s, and now we're, 2026, right? So a lot has happened, and we've had kids, and maybe our kids are kind of raised, or maybe we still have some kids in the house, but we just still carry that incredible guilt and shame. I have talked to so many women lately that have come to me. I started a Facebook group for this
Mhm.
series, and I wasn't even going to open it until this episode aired, and immediately I had 13 women who were like, "Yep, count me in. I really need to talk about this." And women that I know personally that have fantastic partnerships with their spouses. However, they are really struggling. What would you say to that woman right now?
I would say that there's so much hope, and it's never too late. It's never too late to drop into your body and experience healing. Um, I there's a difference between what I teach is there's a difference between compliance and integrated. And when it comes to our sexuality, healing is moving from compliance to a place of integration and embodiment. And that takes time. You don't go from decades of wiring to a place of I'm fully alive in my body and I want to go, swing from the rafters naked with my partner. That's not how this is going to work. At least not for everyone, and that's okay. So much of this is about stripping away judgment and giving space for curiosity and cognitive flexibility, which just means creative thinking, loose thinking that's really anchored in curiosity over judgment. And of all people, Christians are really bad at that. We have a really hard time with that. And so I would encourage these women to lean into the supports. I'm glad you opened that group. Some of my research pointed to group dynamics like Reddit threads and Facebook groups and in-person spaces being one of the more healing instruments, even over therapy at times. Um, Programs like Rescripting Sex that I have is a great way to begin some of this work. And I'm working on developing a community tab for folks so that they can share some of these things. Kingdom Sexuality is a great ministry that's out there. Angela over at Christian Sexpert has some great things. Um, Hearing other women say, you know what, me too, and being able to connect emotionally without comparing stories is really where rubber meets the road in this.
Yeah, that Me Too part is so incredibly powerful, isn't it? That I, you are not alone. I know so many women isolate because we don't share those deep things all the time of what's happening, and we just isolate ourselves in that way. And the reality is, you are not alone. You are not alone. I am so grateful that we got to start our series off with you. You have given us so much incredible things nuggets to chew on. I think this is probably going to be one of those podcasts that you're going to want to rewind, listen to again, take notes, rewind, listen again. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this.
Thank
For
you for
those of you who
having
are
me.
listening, look, we have this is just the beginning. We have a woman from India. Cheryl's going to talk about her experience in arranged marriage in the purity culture. We have couples coming on that have had affairs and different things like that. So lots and lots and lots to come. This is an amazing start. I'm so thankful. Thank you for coming. Hope you'll come back someday.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Lisa.